Good morning, gentlemen. This is a bit off the cuff. I'm a bit unkempt. Oh well, I wanted to make a video about what is D&D? Why play? Because I recently had a epiphany about how to describe this in what I think is a great uh, couple of points, 3 points really, and then there's some other tertiary, secondary details really, and tertiary details that we can talk about. But the 3 points are going to be the DM. So this is what is D&D and why are we playing? The points are the DM. He is going to express his own creativity through two aspects, which is the design of the game world, the whole fictional environment that everything is backdropped in, and specifically also the level design, which includes really everything in the game level, which is monsters, treasure, and that of course interacts with players as well. And that's the first point. The second point is the player side of this, which is the players are showing up to play this game that the DM has created. It's like a personalized board game that they're going to get to enjoy, and of course, we're all going to hang out. It's a social activity. And finally, the third point is the idea of the DM and the players are together generating this random, some random events will happen, and the players will make choices, and this will produce a story, the story of play of what happened. And people love imposing their own narratives on meaningless random events. So that's inherently fun. It's very interesting and it's exciting. But there's going to be some other stuff here. The video is going to be moved beyond those 3 points, but those are the basic points. So I'm going to talk about them in detail. So as far as the DM creativity, world design, level design, the big thing here is you have to, as the DM, the referee, the judge, whatever you want to call this guy, or the architect of the game world for that matter, you have to love doing this. Like you have to actually want to be the DM. So this is the type of person who as a kid, you drew maps. You drew maps without even knowing what D&D was. You just drew maps because they were cool. You played with your action figures and you had all the stories like who these characters are and what they're doing and why they're here, and just sort of embracing imagination about the game world or fictional worlds rather, imaginary worlds in general. You have to like imaginary worlds. You probably read a bunch of fiction. You probably watched a bunch of movies, that sort of thing. And then on the other side, the like drawing maps, game design side, this is something where you are interested in game design. You like drawing maps. You like drawing dungeon levels. You like the idea of setting up challenges that other people are going to face and figure out and try to overcome. And the whole thing here is that D&D is like such a great avenue for this because building a video game or an actual board game is a lot of work. It's a ton of effort. It's kind of a pain. Whereas with D&D, you can come at it from such a more, the amount of effort involved is way less. Basically, is what I'm trying to get at. You can be coming up with new stuff every week, or at least every month. Even if you're very busy, at least every month is a pretty good pace to come up with. That's like one room a day, and you come up with 30 rooms, and that'll get the players through at least one session, possibly more, depending on how you want to play. So it's great. Like you can come up with stuff and have it in front of the players and be playing and having a great game so much more easily with D&D. That's like a huge strength. That's like one of the greatest things about it. It's one of the best ways to take your creativity as a person and to just get it into something that is practical, productive. It's a social activity. It's a lot of fun. You can get the boys together and have a game. That's so cool. It's so great. The next point, player gaming side of this. So from the player perspective, taking everything I just said, from the player side, this is like you got a personalized board game made just for you that you're going to jump into and play. And it's a lot of fun. If the DM likes what he's doing and is creating cool stuff, you are then reaping those rewards because you're jumping in there and you're like, this is so cool. I love these little things that you made. I love the monsters we face. I love the treasures. I love the puzzles. I love the environment, the world. It's so interesting. It's so cool. This is it pulls you in and it makes you want to see more. And it's cool. It's great. It's also just fun, I guess, to just like the basic system side of things. Like a lot of stuff in board games is just sort of the meticulous, like track this, like roll these dice, whatever, and you get all that in D&D. Like you can like we're gonna, we have a combat, we're gonna fight some orcs. it's part of a broader framework, which is good, but it's also just fun to just like roll some dice and I hit an orc for 6 damage, it's dead. Hell yeah, brother. That just it's so dumb, but it feels good. You have to like enjoy that, like that simple, stupid. Like I rolled a dice and I'm so happy that I hit and it did damage. And sometimes you get into those positions where the like I was in this game just yesterday, basically, where I needed to hit for 9 points of damage. Basically, it had to be 9 points, or it was never going to work. I fucking hit for 8 points. Ugh! And it's like, well, okay, there's actually one more chance. If you win initiative for the next round, and you hit again, you'll deal that last 1 point of damage. Miss the attack roll, win the initiative, miss the attack roll by 1 point. Ugh. But it's cool, right? It's exciting. It's gambling. It's basically gambling. I mean, seriously, it really is a lot of D&D is seriously just gambling, and that's kind of fun. People like to gamble. It's inherently fun to have these stakes that are just all comes down to this, boys, and we're throwing the dice. Yeah, I don't know. That's cool. Another thing you can, by the way, just the sort of the open nature of D&D means that you can get into these things where you think about like, okay, wait a minute, I can use this power here, and I can talk to these guys, and then we can get into that fight, and then we'll steal the thing, and then blah blah blah. So it's just this depth that kind of arises organically out of the combination of like the rules and what the DM created and the player creativity. That's just great. It's very interesting, in a way that usually is not the case in a board game or video game, although there are games where those other things do happen. But definitely cool in the context of D&D. And then taking all that in for a moment, breathe. The third point here is just about the DM and player generating the story of play. And I kind of hinted at that a little bit with what I was just saying, but the idea here, back in the day, even in like the 70s, the 60s, whatever, when people were playing these war games, one of the things was they were coming up with names for their guys. They were like, okay, I have this unit, the Civil War unit. This guy's name is Thomas Brudebaker, and he led this charge against the Confederates, and that won the battle of whateversburg. And it just like having these narratives, people love just inherently like assigning meaning and narratives and telling stories and imposing that onto something that was otherwise a bunch of meaningless random events. And maybe not meaningless, but like, I don't know, just this whole thing it's fun to sit back after a session and be like, man, thinking about it, like having like the movie of like, basically you play the game, and then for me personally, when I'm done, the session is like a movie now, like that happened. Like that was like a cool movie that I can then replay in my head, and I sort of imagine it as if I was the director making the movie of the session. Like, and there's this will happen a little bit during the session where people will embellish certain moments. Like in the game, it's just like the imp flies at the monster, the big giant dog thing, and misses, and then gets attacked in turn and gets hit. And you embellish that as like, okay, yeah, you flew over and the dog chomped it, and that's like exciting, like that's cool. It's an embellishment. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the impact of the game, but in terms of the story of the game, and in terms of like having it as a movie in your head of a thing that happened, it elevates it to like a new level. And there's going to be a digression here, because I had this idea of this is something that people will make fun of, and maybe it deserves to be made fun of, but I don't care, because there was a session where I legitimately, unironically cried in real life. Like it legitimately. So the thing is, I'm a bit of like a romantic dude in terms of like I love like building up this stuff in my brain, and the idea of crying in the game is kind of silly and stupid. Like, oh, I have to choke, like I have to like choke back feeling and like leave the room or something. But I wanted to have a digression here about like when it's okay to cry. And there's a joke that I have always told for guys. So one of the things with guys, people are always like, "Oh, I can't cry anymore," and like, "Why can't men cry?" It's because when you turn 25, there's like physiological changes that prevent you from crying. Like you don't cry to the same, like you'll still feel the emotions. Maybe they're like tamped down a bit, but you just physically will not engage the crying response to the same level of things that you had when you were a kid and you cried over whatever, like everything. But I have this lovely thing about when it's okay to cry as a man, and there are 3 times it's okay to cry. Which the first is when your parents die. Basically, you're allowed to shed some tears at the funeral or whatever. And the second, maybe behind closed, I don't know. But the maybe you can shed one tear. The second time is when a particularly heroic dog dies. You are allowed to shed a single tear. Uh, and people argue with me about that one. Like men will be like, "Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's still just a dog." Uh, and it's like okay, okay, we can argue about that one. And then the third time is when you're watching a sad movie. For example, in Toy Story 3, the toys think they're gonna die, and they look at each other and they're like, "With a sit man." And they reach out and they hold each other's hands, and it's just like, man, what the fuck? That's too intense. And it's like tears streaming, just like bawling like a baby. Um, so like that type of like I don't know romanticized like that's life, man. That's life. That's the kind of thing that I think you can get in like a certain type of D&D session. Uh, when you go through with the embellishments, where you like build up this narrative of like who the characters are and what their motivations are, and you can have this funny shit happen that provokes a legitimate emotional response. So whatever, it's fine. You're, it's hard to. The thing is, when you're sitting down and you're talking about D&D, it sounds stupid as hell to say everything that I just said, but I don't know. It's fine. It really is legitimate. I think it's there. I really think that's a real thing. Anyway, I do want to move on to some of my secondary points about this. So just to reiterate, the 3 ideas of like what is D&D and why are we playing it? It's because you have a DM, he's a creative person, he wants to do both world design and level design. You have players who are interested in doing this sort of playing somebody else's personalized board game, and then both sides of the group are interested in these sort of narrative things. Maybe they're the type of person who cries at Toy Story 3. I don't know, maybe not. The ways this goes wrong, basically, is what I'm going to get to, or people who are not suited or not fit because they don't. Something goes wrong with these 3 points. So one of the things, the various types of sickos. One of the types of sickos is like the power gamer or the munchkin or the guy who wants to be like a rules lawyer or just like master the system kind of thing. These are all basically the same person. I mean, maybe there's some subtle differences here, but the idea is someone who isn't interested in playing the board game. They're interested in the rules that allow the board game to happen, like the game of D&D to happen. They're more interested in the like the weapons. Like, oh, I want to talk about the weapons and the weapon versus AC tables, and it's like, dude, that is not like, yes, to some extent the game needs logistics, it needs mechanics, it needs a bunch of stuff to like provide a framework so that it all kind of makes sense and it works. But there's like that's not the focus. That's not like the point of the game. That's not the point of the activity. And certainly this gets even worse when you get into like modern D&D where the rules becomes all about character building because it's all about I need to master the rules and like build the perfect character who can then overcome any challenge that the DM has and win without playing. Basically, that is the big thing. That is the thing. The idea of the power gamer, the rules guy, they're trying to win the game without playing the game. They're not interested in playing the game. That's the thing. They don't want to play the game. They want to win the game without playing. So that's a loser. I mean, that's a sicko. That's a sicko person. Now, I will say, on the converse side of this, there are people who are losers who are just really bad at any type of game. They're never good at anything. And they will use the terms I just used. They will be like, "You're a power gamer," because they suck at life. Like, so you'll have a person who is playing the game legitimately engaged in everything the DM is doing, and people are like, "Oh, that guy's a power gamer." It's like, no, you just have sour grapes because you suck at life, and you need to seriously like improve, work on yourself. Like, I don't know, work out, read some books, eat better, make new friends. I don't know, something to try to improve yourself. But that's sort of a 2 sides of the same coin thing, and that is something that'll come up a lot, which is just the idea that we can come up with these terms for like power gamers, munchkins, or whatever, but they will always be misused by somebody on the opposite side of the coin who has the more who is also some sort of bad person for the other side of the extreme, and they are using those terms to make fun of people who are actually in the middle and are actually the correct people. So there's no real way to know who is who other than you have to just play lots of games and be experienced and live life, and you'll learn over time. Like that's how everything that works. It's how people work. And that battle will never be finished because people are always inventing new language, new solipsism to to bullshit you. But anyway, there's a couple other types of sickos, which are like the story gaming, which happens because there's no DM. Like somebody can say they're the DM and they can have the role of the DM, but they're not a DM. Like they don't do the world building, they don't do the level design, and so you'll get these story gamer types. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I need the players to come in and make the story. That's like it doesn't make any sense. Oh, I need the players to like tell me what the next room is gonna be. Like that doesn't make any sense. And then on the Mudcore side, you have like the DM can't do level design, right? Like he just doesn't know how to do level design, so he won't you'll never get treasure. You'll never like fight reasonable challenges. Like the risk reward just isn't there. You're gonna be level 1 forever. If you do a level up, he doesn't know what to do because he can't write for any characters beyond level 1. So I think that's where Mudcore comes from. It's just the idea of a DM who doesn't know how to do the game side of things. He can't do it. He doesn't know how. And the solution is not to screw the players. It's to stop running the game and sit back and learn. Try to figure out how to do it. In fact, to some extent, you just need to go for it and just practice. Like just let it happen. Just run your crappy dungeons. Everybody made bad dungeons when they first got started. Everybody ran the game badly when they first got started. This is the same of everything in life. You just have to practice. You're gonna be bad to start. Like you don't expect to pick up an instrument and master it in the first day. Why do you expect to draw a perfect dungeon on your first try? How do you expect like you're gonna run a session for 5th level characters and they're not gonna be challenged or they're gonna be killed instantly? Like you have to play it and just get better so that you can escape this Mudcore hell crap. Uh, and we kind of already talked about the other type of person who like wants to play the system. But there's one other type of sicko, which is the idea of the DM. The DM doesn't know how to do level design or world design, so they absolve themselves of responsibility by relying entirely on random tables and procedural generation. The DM doesn't know what they're doing, and this is you'll get dungeons that are just really boring. You'll get game worlds that are really boring, and they're like, oh, they're trying to run somebody else's game. Basically, they're trying to run like a random, like take random elements from somebody else's game. Like that's what procedural generation almost is like somebody else's random ideas. Unless you write the tables yourself, then it can be good. And you have to keep rewriting them as a thing because they'll get stale. But the thing is that type of style will also be encouraged by people who only care about the rules system and the system mastery aspect because they don't care about the DM being a world designer or a level designer. They just want to play the system, which they don't need any of that other stuff. So they'll encourage people, oh yeah, just use the procedures to generate the world, ha ha ha, because they just want to master the system. Come on, man. Anyway, this video is pretty long, but I do have some other topics I want to get into here, which is why is D&D popular right now, basically? Like, why did this... It does feel like there's been a resurgence, not just because of 5e, and not just because of streaming, but because, especially among, like, people in their 30s, or people in their late 20s even, I think there is a popularity surge being driven by video games sucking. Like, games... Like, all the Western studios are, like, crashing and burning, for various reasons that are not worth getting into. I really don't think it's as simple as just claiming that they've hired weird losers who want to make loser games. That certainly is a big part of it, but there's more to it than that, I think. Anyway, it's not important why they suck. They overall, I think they do suck. I do think there are a lot of games out there. So even now, there are some hidden gems coming out on a fairly regular basis that if you are hooked in and you talk to people, you can find them and play them. But they do seem pretty bad overall. And I think another part of this might be that video games in general are played out as a concept. To some extent, I do think, we are just older. People in their late 20s and 30s, we've played a ton of games. So we've kind of seen it all, and it's not as exciting anymore. And then, of course, you'll often have a lot of people with crappy computers in the D&D hobby because they can't run the latest games on their shitbox machines. But I don't think it's as simple. I do agree. I think there is a part of it, for example, that you're older, you're in your 30s or whatever, you're not going to be as excited about the latest video games as a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or even a 20-year-old. But I do think games are kind of played out like in the culture, like literally like everything has been done kind of thing, where there just aren't any new good ideas left to explore. We might have hit the limit in terms of like what video games are even possible to make, and now it's kind of like, well, we've done it all. Like there's nothing left as a culture. But who knows? That's me. That's sort of like a vague, weird prediction for the future that maybe we will see video games gradually decline. But that's sort of odd because there's all sorts of other big factors. But whatever. I do have to point out one other aspect of this, which is the social environment of online gaming has changed dramatically since the early 2000s internet. The online in general is like infested. Like shooters are just infested with Chinese hackers. There's AI bots. Everybody's cheating. There's lots of people online who are basically undesirable forms of human life at this point. It really is crazy. Like you don't get it the extent to which the like 90s and early 2000s, even like before phones, basically when you had to have a PC. That's a different class of person than like every random jackass with a phone. Uh, you, it's very weird to be. Let me put it this way: IQ is real. That's all there needs to be said about that. Anyway, one other aspect of this is not just why is D&D popular now, but why specifically old school. And one of the things with old school, well, on the other side of the coin, let's go with corporate D&D. They've long since embraced that power gaming crap that we talked about earlier, and the whole idea of embracing rules mastery as the primary game. So part of that is just because they have to sell books, right? Like they're going to sell splat books. They want to sell you character options because there's more players in our DMs, which means it's financially incentivized for them to like put out a bunch of books for players, and now that means the game is oriented around players making characters, which isn't really the thing, like right? Like that's not what D&D is. We talked about this in the beginning of the video. D&D is not that. D&D is making is the referee making levels in the world and the players playing it. Like their characters they're relevant because it's interesting for the players to all have different roles and have different capabilities, but the game isn't about making characters, right? Like that's not the thing. Like anyway, the old school really is the best avenue for embracing the DM as the world designer, the level designer, and not as a storyteller or anything else, where he's just sort of, because that's another thing that people will do with the new games is like that. Yes, people made their characters, but like, oh, the DM's gonna tell us a story and do lots of funny voices and stuff and blah blah blah. But no, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what D&D was or is. Players are here to play the game that you, the referee, made. They're not here to play somebody else's game. They're not here to play the system. We're not doing mudcore. We're not doing story gaming. We're not doing sicko shit. We're hanging out with the boys. We'll play some elf games. The DM created just for us. So yeah, I think that covers most of it. I did leave off a little bit here about the new school being basically calling them sexual preverts is one thing. I mean, to some extent, there's a minority of them who are legitimately criminals, engaged in criminal behavior, and people flock to that for some reason. So, like most of the people, obviously, in like a new school are not themselves criminals, but there's I don't know, there's this thing I don't like to interact with people who kind of have uh, that personality where they like simp for like a very like vile person. But that seems to me like what the new school is, and I'm actually sorry that I even brought this up now because this is a terrible way to end the video. Well, that sucks. So anyway, have a good day, everyone.